Let me guess. You're here because this was randomly recommended to you by YouTube, and the idea of comparing these two was just so wild to the point you had to click on it, even if it makes no sense. I seriously doubt that anyone is here because they saw the points I'm about to bring up by themselves and thought that this would be a good comparison. I'm not throwing shades at anyone. I just know that I am really damn nuts to even come up with this. Well, regardless if you're here due to morbid curiosity or not, I totally get you. It is a weird comparison. What in the hell do these two movies have in common which just begs comparing? Believe it or not, these two actually have plenty in common. The first being that both of them star two characters I love dearly. Sonic the Hedgehog has been my favorite character ever since I was little, and he'll most likely hold that title until the end of time. You probably know this though, because my avatar is basically 50% him. Supergirl, on the other hand, is a more recent obsession. I've known about the character for years, but my experience with her was minimal. I only got attached to her last year following her funny cameo at the end of James Gunn's Superman movie, in which she reminded me of a good friend. That convinced me to read Women of Tomorrow, and now I'm basically caught up on most of the character's history. I know what you're all thinking. Sonic and Supergirl being two favorite characters of yours doesn't mean these two movies have enough to compare between them. Ah! You'd be correct. But those of you with sharp senses may have noticed I said they have several things in common. Which leads us to the more relevant point. Both of those movies are adaptations. True, one adapts a video game while the other adapts a comic book, but they are adaptations nonetheless. That's what I want to talk to you about today. You see, I have this mentality that an adaptation doesn't have to be 100% accurate to the source material. As long as the core idea and message of the original is there, you can make a few changes. I may not like every change that's being made, but as long as it doesn't mess with the heart of the thing you're adapting, I'm not that up in arms about it like some other people are. Supergirl, which I will now refer to as Supergirl 26 in order to differentiate it from the terrible movie from the 80s and the character itself, sparked one hell of a controversy regarding the very big change it made to Women of Tomorrow's ending. There were some other changes to be sure, yet it's the ending which I noticed people bringing up the most as a sour point. We'll get to my opinions on the matter later. However, as I was pondering this, my mind kept going back to Sonic the Hedgehog 3, which I'll refer to as Sonic Movie 3 for simplicity's sake. Besides the fact that everything with me begins and ends with this blue hedgehog, another realization hit me. Sonic Movie 3 made a ton of changes to the plot of the game it adapts, not to mention the backstory of its featured character. And yet, the Sonic fanbase seems to mostly accept it. And if you've been around the Sonic fanbase, you know what that place could be like and how much it's a damn miracle. Everyone seems to be okay with this one. Being a fan of both characters, and the particular stories in general, the difference in opinions fascinated me, and I've been pondering it for the past couple of days. If I had to give you a very basic and general opinion on either film, Sonic Movie 3 is about a 9 out of 10, while Supergirl 26 is about a 7 out of 10. One I think is awesome, while the other I see as mostly okay. I should mention that at the time of this writing, Supergirl 26 has been out for less than a month, so my opinion on it is still fresh compared to Sonic Movie 3. This idea doesn't leave my head though, and I need to get it out there in the world, so let's compare these two movies and see why one adaptation is celebrated and the other is criticized. Also, by the way, Supergirl 26 had its premiere on June 23rd, which is Sonic's birthday, so I'm just going to say that it was all connected and no one can prove me otherwise. Cool? Cool. Let's begin. Before we start talking about the movies themselves, I think it's important to discuss the respective source material which inspired them. Sonic Adventure 2, which came out in 2001, and Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, which came out in 2021. Huh, exactly 20 years apart. I'm almost starting to think that this isn't a coincidence. Almost. Anyway, what surprised me while I was debating this comparison with myself is that these two outings in their respective franchises are pretty similar to each other. I mean, obviously one is a comic book and one is a video game, two mediums which aren't similar whatsoever, and yeah, one is a western in space while the other is an action-adventure sci-fi story. Fair arguments to bring up against the notion that these two could be similar. Now's my turn to show you the receipts. Sonic Adventure 2, or at least its GameCube port titled Sonic Adventure 2 Battle, was the first Sonic game to be released on a console which Sega didn't make. As a result, this was the first Sonic game many people have played. On the other hand, if you were a returning fan, you may have been surprised to discover that the game has a darker and more involved story than any other Sonic game before it. While I can't say it has any lessons or morals to take from it, at least not ones which were intended by the script, it does deal with themes such as revenge and loss which are presented through Shadow's character. A very popular rival character who debuted in this game and became so popular that he is now a franchise mainstay. In the comic book world, Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow is considered a modern classic and is seen as the quintessential story to read with the Maid of Might in the title role. In fact, many will recommend this story as a jumping off point if you're interested in the character. I can testify for myself, as I started with Woman of Tomorrow, and I'm more than happy that I did. Despite that, it is a very different take on Supergirl than what most people would expect. She mostly had those elements to her which made her less squeaky clean than her cousin. I'm guessing that's the term I'm going with. But it was still a much older and more cynical take on Kara Zor-El, more so than what people would probably think about when they hear the name Supergirl. The story also focused on themes such as revenge, loss, trauma, and discovering yourself through those things. Notice the similarities? No, here's a recap. Both Sonic Adventure 2 and Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow are seen as monumental releases in their respective franchises' legacy, even down to being people's introductions to said franchises. Both of them are also darker than what people would expect from these characters at the time of their release. And last but not least, both stories revolved around similar themes, which include revenge and how to deal with the loss of a loved one. The final similarity is that both of them got a movie adaptation, but that's the obvious one since we are going to discuss these movie adaptations in a bit. Sonic Adventure 2 has quite the iconic story. After hearing that his grandfather, Gerald Robotnik, developed a military weapon which was shut down, Dr. Ivor Robotnik, or Eggman, whatever you want to call him, is determined to find it as part of his latest scheme to conquer the world. The weapon, meant to serve as the ultimate life form, is revealed to be a black hedgehog named Shadow. The mysterious rodent informs Eggman that the weapon his grandfather made, called the Eclipse Cannon, is attached to a now-defunct space colony and is capable of wiping out an entire planet. With seemingly common goals, Eggman and Shadow team up in order to find the 7 Chaos Emeralds which are required in order to fully power up the cannon. While that is going on, the military organization GUN apparently employs a lot of colorblind people in its ranks, because they mistaken Shadow to be none other than Sonic the Hedgehog. I know I'm not the first one to bring it up, but seriously, how can you confuse these two? Even without color, their silhouettes look nothing alike. To make a long story short, Sonic discovers that his Faker and Eggman are working together, and he has to team up with his friends in order to stop them. All the characters eventually meet up in some way, shape or form on the Space Colony arc, where the Chaos Emeralds are collected and are placed inside the Eclipse Cannon. However, a sudden message featuring the deceased Gerald Robotnik starts playing. Now that all 7 emeralds are in place, the Space Colony has entered an automatic collision course with Earth and is going to destroy their whole damn planet. Yeesh! No kill like overkill, I suppose. While the heroes and Eggman rush to stop it from happening, Shadow seems fully content with the events. We learn throughout the game that Shadow's motivation to destroy the world comes from a promise he made to his good friend Maria, who was shot dead in front of him. Maria was also Gerald's granddaughter and Eggman's cousin, to those who are wondering. Therefore, Shadow knew the space colony would destroy the whole Earth, and he believes that'd be what Maria would want. As he remembers, she asked him to avenge her seconds before she died. It's only after some convincing from Amy, when Shadow remembers his true promise to Maria was to give the people of Earth a chance to be happy. Realizing his mistake, the Black Hedgehog leaps into action and helps Sonic and Knuckles by fighting his prototype. Don't ask me how this led to this, science is a weird endeavor and let's leave it at that. The prototype then merges with the space colony in order to guide it towards Earth, leading to Sonic and Shadow using the power of the emeralds in order to transform into their super forms in one of the most iconic scenes in video game history. I will not be taking questions. The two hedgehogs stop the space colony in place, but due to the tons of energy needed, Shadow ends up falling to his apparent death, content with the fact he fulfilled his promise to Maria. Sonic survives because he's the main character of the franchise and because he's better than Shadow, come at me, and the characters reflect on the journey before heading back to the planet that's cool and blue as the titular hero. In a sharp contrast, Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow opens with a ruthless killer, Creme of the Yellow Hills, slaying an innocent farmer who supplied them with a meal and a shelter. Devastated and angry, the farmer's daughter Ruthie sets on a quest to find someone who's going to help her locate Creme and kill him in revenge. The people whom she asks are quick to dismiss her pleas, and one particular brute who steals her sword catches the intention of a drunk Kara Zor-El, aka Supergirl. On her 21st birthday, Kara decided to visit a planet with a red sun so that she could get wasted. Troubles seem to find the superheroine regardless of the different planet when she gets in a fight with the same guy who tried taking away Ruthie's sword. The following morning, Ruthie asks for Supergirl's help in tracking down Creme and killing him, but the hero refuses the offer because killing is wrong and so on. Things change when seconds before Supergirl uses her spaceship to return home, Creme shows up at the scene, injures Crypto the Superdog, and steals the spaceship. What an asshole! From that point on, the comic mostly shows Supergirl and Ruthie travel to different planets in search of Creme. While Ruthie is still fixated on the idea of revenge and delivering what she feels is justice, Supergirl is going on the journey in order to gain information from the killer on how to save Crypto. The pair goes from planet to planet in search of clues for Creme's whereabouts, and end up helping other inhabitants along the way. While Creme himself kind of vanishes from the story, his presence is felt throughout, as he is often responsible for the problems the two leads face throughout their journey. Supergirl and Ruthie come across a bunch of locations while searching for the Vow criminal. A space bus station which is under attack by a cosmic dragon, villagers which appear to be peaceful and lacking any issues, but are secretly racist to off-worlders and are responsible for 1,000 deaths, families and souls who were destroyed due to the horrible deeds of Creme, and last but not least, a planet with a green sun which was meant to serve as a prison for Superman, and now his cousin has to survive that prison for 10 hours. If you need any proof that Supergirl is better than Superman, here's your proof. Along the way, the two obviously develop a strong friendship. While Supergirl is an established hero by this point, even if she's only known due to her connection to Superman, Ruthie is still a little girl with a slightly naive point of view. The story isn't just about Kara's journey to save her dog. It's also about Ruthie growing and learning that the universe is much bigger and a lot more complex, rather than just being a simple case of black and white. Ruthie might learn from Supergirl, but Supergirl also ends up learning a lot from Ruthie. As different as they are, they're also pretty similar. The girl's journey eventually leads them to Creme and his army of brigands. While Supergirl takes on the army alongside Comet the Superhorse, Ruthie attempts to kill Creme but discovers that she can't do it. Supergirl then explains to Ruthie that Crypto is actually fine and that she went on this journey with her in order to teach her that revenge wouldn't make her feel any better. Kara assumes that Ruthie didn't learn anything because she did try to kill Creme, but then the young girl claims that she learned the lesson. By watching Kara help people and assisting her throughout the journey even though she lost her home, Ruthie realizes how you can move forward with your life despite the grief you're going through. Supergirl and Ruthie trap Krem in the Phantom Zone, and 300 years later, they release an old and regretful Krem from his imprisonment. In an ending matching the visuals of the very first page of the book, Ruthie bonks the old Krem on the head as the story concludes. I initially saw it as Ruthie killing Krem now that he's old and served his punishment, but Tom King confirmed that that's not the case, so I'm trusting the person who wrote the thing more than myself. Like I said earlier, two stories which are darker than anticipated, themes of revenge and loss are at the front of both tales, and both of the stories are iconic and memorable for different reasons. I also just now realized both of climaxes feature in an epic fight scene in the vacuum of space. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? But stupid jokes aside, Sonic Adventure 2 and Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow do share these similarities between them. They're not the same kind of story whatsoever, and if we need to discuss the quality of each story, it's not really a comparison because Sonic Adventure 2 has plenty of plot holes in it, which means it automatically falls short of Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow's league. Hey, being a fan doesn't mean I can't admit faults, and I need to be objective here. You know something? Being a fan of both is what makes it wild to realize how similar these two iconic stories are on the surface. Now, both of them were turned into movies, as you're most likely aware, so let's finally talk about them. Quick notes before we start. In this section, I'm going to summarize the movies in a similar way as I did their source materials. I'm not going to compare anything yet, I just want to go over both of these movies as movies first. Also, since Supergirl 26 isn't available on digital or Blu-ray at the time of this video, I'm recapping it to the best of my ability from two viewings. I guess this is also the time in which I address an elephant in the room. How can I compare a third movie in a trilogy to somewhat of a standalone movie? Like I said earlier, I'm not comparing the movies as movies, I'm comparing them as adaptations. Which means basic stuff like writing, directing, editing and so forth aren't much of a factor in this video. I mean, they are, but not in the general sense. This isn't about the quality of each movie as a movie, but rather how it adapts the source material. This is also the main reason why I'm just going to quickly summarize the movies instead of going in depth about them. What matters in this comparison is how the two stories were adapted into a film, rather than judging the qualities of the movies as, movies. Also, if you want to get technical, Supergirl 26 technically continues from Superman 25 and is supposedly leading directly into Man of Tomorrow, which is coming out next year. So if you want to get really technical, it's second in a series as it is a part of the DCU. Saying all of that quickly gave me a headache, but doesn't matter now, let's recap. Sonic Movie 3 opens with Shadow, voiced by Keanu Reeves, escaping the gun facility he was held at after being freed. Since he's a threat, Gunn contacts Sonic, Tails and Knuckles, voiced again by Ben Schwartz, Colin O'Shaughnessy and Idris Elba respectively, and asks them to take care of the problem. Shadow proves to be a lot tougher than anticipated, however, and he gives Team Sonic quite the run for their money. Following a drone attack in which Commander Walters, played again by Tom Butler, seemingly dies, he entrusts Sonic and Co. with a card key, which guards a dangerous weapon. Our heroes then discover that Dr. Robotnik, or Eggman, whatever you prefer, played again by Jim Carrey, is alive and well thanks to Agent Stone, played again by Lee Majub. Realizing the person who freed Shadow is using Robotnik's tech, heroes and villains appear to have a common enemy and they decide to team up. Meanwhile, Shadow returns to the base in which he was held initially, where he reunites with Gerald Robotnik, also played by Jim Carrey. Gerald was the head scientist in the project studying Shadow, and both were connected to Gerald's granddaughter Maria, played by Lila Brown. When the aligned teams of Sonic and Eggman arrive at the base after tracking Gerald down, Shadow captures Team Sonic while grandfather and grandson reunite and decide to join forces in Gerald's revenge plan. With the threat bigger than ever, Team Sonic asks for the help of Tom and Maddie, played again by James Marsden and Tika Sumpter respectively. Everyone converges at the Gun Fortress in London, where the fight for both keycards is on. At some point, Shadow encounters Tom, who's been disguised as Commander Walters, and he attacks him. With both cards in hand, Gerald, Eggman, and Shadow activate the Eclipse Cannon and are heading to space. Tom is badly injured and is rushed to the hospital, which leaves Sonic broken and willing to take drastic actions. Even though his friends advise against it, Sonic uses the Master Emerald's power in order to transform into Super Sonic and go after Shadow. After the cannon is powered up, Gerald explains to Eggman that once it fires, it would destroy the entirety of Earth, including themselves, which shocks the Mad Doctor and he decides to rebel. After a long fight, Sonic has Shadow beaten and is about to go for the kill, until he realizes killing Shadow isn't in his blood and he doesn't go along with it. Shocked by Sonic's decision, Shadow realizes that Maria wouldn't want him to kill humanity for her, and he teams up with Sonic in order to stop the cannon in one of the coolest scenes in cinema. I won't take questions yet again. The two Super Hedgehogs manage to block the cannon for long enough while Eggman beats his grandfather with the help of Tails and Knuckles. The two friends then save Sonic, who powered down, while Eggman and Shadow sacrifice themselves by making sure the space colony wouldn't destroy Earth. With the threat gone and Tom recovering, Team Sonic is ready for their next challenge. We are once again sharply contrasting to Supergirl 26, which opens with Kara Zor-El, aka Supergirl, played by Millie Alcock, being an absolute wreck. She lives in a messy trailer with her dog Crypto, partying and getting drunk on planets which have red suns, and avoiding her cousin's pleas to return to Earth and try to make a path for herself. On one of those planets with a red sun lives a weapon manufacturer who receives a visit from Krem of the Yellow Hills, played by Matthias Schoenaerts, and his army of brigands. Side note, I really hope I pronounced the actor's name correctly, because I'm not trying to do that again. When things unintentionally escalate, Krem ends up murdering the whole family, but missing the youngest daughter Ruthie, played by Eve Ridley. The young girl goes around the planet looking for someone to accompany her on the journey to kill Krem. Kara happens to be at the bar Ruthie scouts, and while not interested in the journey, she helps the girl get the sword back from an alien which stole it. Impressed, the young girl wants to recruit the jaded superhero for her task. Kara keeps refusing to partake in assisting a young girl chase revenge, until Krem steals her ship and shoots Crypto. Wanting to save her dog and realizing Ruthie wouldn't let her do it alone, the two partake in the journey together. Arriving on a planet the brigands are known to frequent, Kara and Ruthie are informed that the Val pricks come to the planet in order to steal themselves child brides so they could have kids who would continue their horrible ways. With the help of Lobo, played by Jason Momoa, whom I only mention because it seems mandatory to mention Lobo is played by Jason Momoa in this movie, Supergirl saves the young girls from the brigands, but missing one. Ruthie attempts to kill Krem when she has the chance, but Kara stops her, which results with the asshole murdering the family of the kid Kara missed and her two parents. The two girls have a heated argument over the idea of killing Krem and they split ways. Without much time to waste, Kara agrees to go to the brigands' home planet, which ends up being a planet with a green sun, which is poisonous to her. She is dragged to shelter by Ruthie, who snuck onto the ship, and the two reconcile as Ruthie admits that she is happy to know Kara and takes care of her. Alas, Ruthie is captured while going to get water and is now in the brigands' prison. However, she manages to survive until the yellow sun rises and Supergirl arrives to save her, now wearing her famous suit. In what is, admittedly, the best action sequence in the movie, Supergirl defeats the brigands, saves the child brides they kidnapped, and protects Ruthie from Krem. When the psychopath lays defeated and Ruthie has her chance at killing him, Supergirl once again argues against it and manages to convince the young girl that her going on and living will be her revenge against Krem. Then Supergirl herself kills the fucker as revenge for what he did to Crypto and killing that one girl. Trust me, we'll talk about this later. With Crypto healed and Krem gone, Ruthie decides to stay with her aunt and start making weapons like her father. Supergirl admits that her days of drinking and partying are behind her, but still invites Ruthie for a round since she didn't finish celebrating her birthday properly. Kara then goes back to Earth to visit Superman, who I only now realize that I didn't mention he's played again by David Cornsweet. Anyway, she tells him that this time she is planning to stay on Earth for a while, and even refers to Earth as home. Now that I recapped both movies back to back, alongside their respective source materials, I should probably inform you that I've been secretly testing you this whole time. From just those recaps alone, what did you notice about Sonic Movie 3 and Supergirl 26 as adaptations? I'm asking it as if you could answer me, even though it's clear to anyone that you can't, as is the nature of pre-recorded videos. Well, it helps to build tension, I guess. Based on those very bare-bones recaps of both movies, you might notice that Supergirl 26 follows Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow a lot more closely than Sonic Movie 3 does with Sonic Adventure 2. Again, when you look at both at face value. Supergirl 26 does make some changes to the story, like having the entirety of Ruthie's family killed by crime instead of just her father. Her father's occupation is also different for that matter. Supergirl is also a bit older than in the book, celebrating her 23rd birthday as opposed to her 21st. Besides the space bus and the planet with the green sun, none of the planets from Women of Tomorrow are mentioned or seen. It seems like they fused all of them to the one planet Kara and Ruthie visit, where they meet Lobo and that family. Speaking of, both Lobo and Superman were added to the movie when they weren't in the comic at all. Krypto is also in actual danger in this version as opposed to the comic. Then again, all of these changes are pretty minor and they don't take away from what the story was originally, which was Kara and Ruthie's journey together. Sonic Movie 3, on the other hand, made a lot of changes to the basic plot. Granted, plenty of those changes are made because it is the third movie in a trilogy, which established its own lore and changes in comparison to the games. I completely get that, and that's why I'm not going to note that Amy and Rouge don't make an appearance. Yes, I know Amy's in the mid-credits scene. What I meant is that she's not a part of the story. So what changes does the movie make which aren't a result of it? Well, first and foremost, Joel Robotnik is alive in the present day of the movie, and he's the one who frees Shadow as opposed to Eggman. The Eclipse Cannon's function is plenty different in both the way it operates and that it's a single device, separated completely from the Ark. Some locations and set pieces from the game are also vastly different. The biggest changes, however, are made to Shadow's backstory, which was the core of Sonic Adventure 2's plot. In any other video, I'd tell you that Supergirl 26 is the better adaptation of the two because it stuck closer to its highly regarded source material, resulting in massive fan adoration. This isn't the video you're watching right now. Supergirl 26 is facing a lot of backlash for not getting the comic which inspired it, while Sonic Movie 3 is being lauded by fans for doing the game justice, alongside the character of Shadow and the franchise as a whole. You got to admit, looking at both at face value like we just did, these wouldn't be the reactions you'd expect, right? Especially when Sonic the Hedgehog is part of the conversation, and that fan base... Okay, I made that joke before, no need to repeat it. And it's not like comic book fans are less nitpicky about these things, debatably. So you might ask yourselves, just like I am as a fan of both of these franchises, what happened here? Well, we'll never find out the answers if we just stare at the ground all day, right? We got to dig deeper, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. Let's start analyzing this paradox by seeing what exactly made Sonic Movie 3 such a beloved adaptation. It will never stop being bizarre looking at this movie as the one that got it right in this comparison. As I said before, it made a lot of changes to one of the most iconic stories in the history of this franchise. Not to mention all of the changes made to the backstory of the second most popular character, based on every fucking poll I've seen on the matter. Let's run over the changes one more time to make sure we're all on the same page. Not counting the mid-credit scene again, Amy, Rose and Rouge the Bat aren't in the movie, meaning we cut two characters out of the story. One of them debuted in it. Joel Robotnik is alive in the present day and was not executed after the whole Ark disaster. For that matter, there is no space colony Ark. Shadow was experimented on in a gun facility back on Earth, while the Eclipse Cannon is its own thing. Eggman doesn't free Shadow in this version, Gerald does. And last but not least, key locations and set pieces are different between the game and the movie. Let's go over those changes real quick. I can understand why Amy and Rouge were cut from the movie. You need to establish these two from the ground up in a movie which is supposed to establish and focus on Shadow, so cutting them makes sense. I'm aware Rouge was also introduced in Sonic Adventure 2 alongside Shadow, but she's not as important to the story, and also we could buy an anthropomorphic bat in the game because Sonic and Co just exist there and run around like there's no big deal. In the movie's universe, however, these creatures are literal aliens, and Gunn seems to hunt them down based on the previous movies and the Knuckles miniseries. This means you'd have to give Rouge more background than simply being a gun agent, because why would they employ a creature they'd otherwise hunt? Not having Amy means her big scene with Shadow is taken away from her, again, however we'll get to that bit later. Overall, as much as I like Amy and Rouge, the movie knew not to shove them in haphazardly. And considering we're going to get Amy next time, I'm sure Rouge's time to shine will come soon. While set pieces and locations don't match exactly with the game, the overall adventure did capture the spirit of it. We once again have a group of heroes and a group of villains in a race against each other to stop or activate a weapon which can destroy Earth. Besides, we do get iconic moments from the game in here, they're just a little different. Shadow's escape from Prison Island is accounted for, the circumstances are just tweaked a little. Doesn't mean it's not here. Sonic is seen jumping out of a helicopter, even reciting the exact same line he says in the game. Only this time he has Tails and Knuckles with him, and he's on a mission from Gun instead of escaping them. The first meeting between Sonic and Shadow is also staged very similarly to how they meet in the game. Again with the addition of Tails and Knuckles. Shadow and Maria may not have been on a space colony watching the Earth, which results in a scene of them watching the stars together. It's not the same, if anything, it's the exact opposite, but the idea at its core is the same. Maria's fate, as well as its impact on Shadow, remains the same in the movie, despite the fact she is not killed by a soldier's gunshot directly. Also, if you happen to cheer once Maria died in the movie, I need to check what the hell is wrong with you. It was just a stupid meme, people, nobody actually expected you to cheer. In the game, Eggman decides to join forces with the heroes because he doesn't want to destroy the world, just conquer it. In the movie, however, he is hurt by the fact his grandfather wants to eliminate all of humanity and doesn't even see him as a favorite grandson compared to Maria. Last but not least, we did get the epic fight in space with Super Sonic and Super Shadow, but we didn't just get a team up, we also get them fighting against each other, which is so fucking cool. And of course, we do have Live and Learn in the movie. The point I'm trying to make is that while the beats may be different from the game, they serve either a similar point to the iconic moments from it, or just add to what you'd expect out of them. Now, you may have noticed I skipped some of the changes I listed earlier, and that's because I figured they'd be better to talk about right now, when I discussed the biggest change from Sonic Adventure 2 and Sonic Movie 3, Shadow the Hedgehog himself. Shadow is quite the big deal. He's one of the reasons Sonic Adventure 2 is so beloved, and he's basically the main reason people were excited for Sonic Movie 3. Shadow the Hedgehog is a beloved character, and he's got quite the backstory to adapt even if you only follow Sonic Adventure 2 and ignore his own shitty game and his own amazing game. That's why I find it so fascinating that the writing team basically ignored most of it and made their own version of his story. And what's even more fascinating is that the crazy bastards made it work. Even better than the source material, I'd argue. Quite the claim, huh? Let's back it up a bit. In the game, Shadow was created by Gerald as a military-funded project to develop the ultimate lifeform. Following his creation, Shadow became good friends with Maria, growing as close as siblings. When Gunn raids the Ark as part of shutting down the project, Shadow tries to protect Maria, but she ends up being shot and in her final moments sends Shadow to Earth with a request to give humanity a chance to be happy. When he heard Maria died, Gerald went insane, and it is implied that somehow he tampered with Shadow's memories in order to make him believe Maria did ask him to avenge her, so he'd carry out the revenge plan. I have to be fair here, as iconic and popular as Sonic Adventure 2 may be, The story has plenty of plot holes which are quite confusing, and this is one of them. That being said, this is something Sonic Movie 3 actually fixes. In the movie, Shadow is an alien who arrived to Earth on an asteroid, which might foreshadow something, but it's not relevant now. Gunn finds and studies him, appointing Gerald as the lead scientist. Since the professor takes his granddaughter with him everywhere, Maria finds the tube Shadow's captain and the two develop a close friendship. While everyone at the lab is afraid of Shadow because of his powers and abilities, Maria sees him as her friend and believes he is good at heart. Considering Shadow knows nothing about where he is from, Maria's friendship is the only thing which grounds him and allows him to play around and not be tested on all the time. Following the accident which results in Maria's death, Gerald is arrested while keeping one of Shadow's quills with him. Shadow himself is put in stasis for 50 years, being too dangerous to let go and too valuable in order to destroy. That alone pisses him off once he is free, something Gerald uses once they reunite in order to fuel Shadow's will to help him destroy the world. The fact that Gerald is a physical entity in this movie which constantly urges Shadow to avenge Maria fixes the plot hole where it was unclear when he was able to tamper with his memories in the game. At least considering how the game presented the events. The explanation also makes sense as it was Shadow's quill and energy which kept Gerald alive for so long. As for Shadow's redemption, that sort of leads us to the other big thing about the story. In either version, the rivalry with Sonic. The rivalry between these two is more than just iconic. It's one of the biggest rivalries in the gaming world, and not just for the whole "the hero has a darker version of himself" trope. While both are similar in their looks and abilities, what differentiates them is their personalities. Sonic is the friendly, playful, and sarcastic adventurer who saves the day and helps those in need, but he's also an easygoing spirit who is looking for fun and adventure in everything, even if the task at hand is very serious. Shadow, on the other hand, is a serious, tough, no-nonsense fighter whose only focus is the mission which is currently at hand. Well, he's generally a good guy deep down, and he can probably have a bit of fun every once in a while. He's not much for appreciating the little things in life, and if he has to make a sacrifice in order to complete his goal, he'd take it, no matter the price. This rivalry is so beloved not just because the two characters are equally matched, but also because they are both similar and different enough so that you understand why they're clashing whenever it happens. The movie builds upon this basis in the best way possible. For one, I appreciate how their similar looks are only brought up one time as a joke and then never again. It was such a dumb plot point in the game, which I could attribute to cartoon logic, but otherwise I'm glad it was removed from here. It wouldn't have worked in this movie. Where the two are more similar to each other in this version is in their backstories. In the movie's continuity, we know Sonic suffered loss before when he lost Longclaw, his caretaker back when he was little. Now he has a new place on Earth after meeting and having Tom and Maddie as parental figures who guide him properly. As you'd expect, by grounding Shadow and providing him with a friendship and guidance, Maria basically serves as his version of both Longclaw and Tom. Maddie too, but Grammarly just sounded better. One of the best scenes in the movie is when Shadow realizes he hurt Tom, whom he thought was Walter's. Up until this point, Shadow doesn't think about anything besides his need to avenge Maria. Blinded by the rage, Gerald keeps injecting inside of him. When he sees Tom wasn't who he thought he was, it's the first time the Hedgehog realizes he made a mistake. Not only that, seeing Sonic's reaction to his unconscious father figure registers to Shadow that he just caused someone the exact same loss which he had gone through with Maria. He doesn't even say anything during this moment, he just processes it. Even when Sonic asks him angrily what he did, Shadow shrugs it as what he had to do despite clearly regretting the action. The Super Sonic and Super Shadow fight isn't just awesome because it's a fantastic action scene, although it is an awesome action scene. What elevates it so much is that now, Sonic is at the exact same position Shadow is in terms of his anger, and Shadow even calls him out on it. I love how when Sonic has Shadow and can totally kill him right there, the Black Hedgehog doesn't flinch. He knows what's coming, and considering the other scene with Tom we just talked about, he might actually believe he deserves it, as he encourages Sonic to go through with it and fucking kill him. When Sonic refuses to go through with it, Shadow doesn't use the opportunity to fight back. He's shocked. He's questioning Sonic's decision because he knows that if it were the opposite, he wouldn't have stopped himself. Remember when I mentioned earlier that they gave Amy's big scene with Shadow to another character? I am more than okay with that character being Sonic himself. Who's better to open Shadow's eyes to the wrongs of revenge than, for a lack of a better term, his mirror? The fact that the scene also resembles how he used to sit with Maria under the stars, only now he is watching the Earth from the moon instead of the moon from the Earth? Perfect image. I love how one unexpected action from his once enemy shows Shadow that he can move past his pain by remembering the joyful memories of Maria, and not getting lost in the pain which came from her death. He's even willing to sacrifice himself in order to fix his mistakes, which is just as powerful, even if we know he survived thanks to the post-credit scene. So yeah, as I said earlier, and I'm not sure how much of a hot take this is, I prefer Shadow's story in Sonic Movie 3 compared to Sonic Adventure 2. Not to say that it's done poorly there, otherwise the story wouldn't have been so beloved. I just think that in terms of plot coherence and structure, the movie handled the whole thing better. Which, yeah, it's a movie, you would expect there to be more effort put into the script in a movie rather than a game, especially in 2001. It is what it is though, and for what both of them are, I think Sonic Movie 3 is a massive improvement over Sonic Adventure 2, and I think that's the main takeaway. What Sonic Movie 3 got right is that it knew the original story and what fans of that story loved about it, understood where the problems were, realized what the heart of the whole thing was, and just combined it with established details from the previous Sonic films. Thus, we got an adaptation which may have changed a lot about the story people were familiar with for over 20 years, but it knew what made people connect with that story and made sure that every change played into it. And in addition to all of that, this adaptation ended up being just a great movie on its own, which is seen by many as the best in the series so far. Now, without any clever segue to the other side of the comparison, this is going to be painful. Not because Supergirl 26 is a bad movie by any means. Like I said, I overall had fun with it and thought it was decent. No, this one is going to be painful because, and I hate to be that guy, the main problem with this movie is that it doesn't live up to Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. Yes, it's kind of a big deal when the source material is such a well-regarded work, and the movie, which prides itself on the fact it's adapted from it, is just okay-ish. Let's address the minor changes I brought up earlier first. Krem killing the entirety of Rudy's family isn't a change I mind too deeply. If anything, I think it makes her hatred for the fucker and wanting to kill him more understandable and relatable. Rudy's father building weapons instead of being a farmer? I could take or leave that one, honestly. I mean, Krem killing an innocent farmer who fed and sheltered him makes him more of an asshole, but a person who creates weapons would be more of a target for him in the first place. I don't mind either one, both of these work in their own way. Kara being 23 instead of 21 is a non-issue. The only reason this change exists is because Americans are pussies and don't allow people younger than 21 to drink. And the only reason I brought mention to it is because I wanted to say Americans are pussies for not allowing people younger than 21 to drink. Crypto actually dying is another change I don't really mind. I like how Supergirl essentially tricks Rudy in the comic, but the dog being in actual danger adds to the tension and doesn't feel like a cop-out, for lack of a better term. In terms of characters added which weren't in the book, I like how they incorporated Superman in this movie. He doesn't overshadow Supergirl too much, and he's also not in the movie for very long. In fact, I think he helps Kara with her character development instead of subtracting from it. Lobo, on the other hand, I get what they wanted to do with him. He's supposed to be the bad influence on Ruthie, while Kara is the good influence, but nothing he does really impacts anything in the movie itself. He just does his thing and then fucks off without any resolution. I still say you could have cut Lobo from the screenplay and nothing would have changed. Which is also really funny since Lobo was cut from the Woman of Tomorrow comic, something the new movie now confirms was the right call because he doesn't affect anything. The movie did cut one character from the book, and that's the one and only Comet the Superhorse. To be fair, I expected him not to make it into the movie. Let's be real, they wouldn't have let a half-horse, half-human guy, who the main character admits to have dated, be in here. Then again, they could have cut the half-human part out of it. Well, it doesn't matter. As much as I would have loved for Comet to be in the movie, I understand why he wasn't, and I'm just nitpicky for the sake of the Comet stans who are watching. I see you, my friends. Comet will have justice one day. Now, one of the changes I mentioned earlier while summarizing the movie is that a lot of the planets Supergirl and Ruthie visit in Woman of Tomorrow aren't in Supergirl 26. A completely fair compromise since it was pretty obvious they can't shove the entire book into a 110-minute long movie. The solution they took, on paper, sounds like a good way to solve the problem. As I said earlier, the various planets the two girls visit in the comic suffer from some kind of problem which was infected on them by Krem. Instead of multiple planets then, we only have one planet. A planet which the brigands favor for getting drunk and kidnapping young girls to serve as their brides. Again, on paper, this is not a bad solution. We don't have a lot of time, so having one planet which summarizes Krem and the brigands' terrible crimes should be the way to go when adapting to the big screen. We also spent quite a hefty chunk of the movie on this planet. Hell, I'd even argue the whole second act is spent on it. If you were going to turn Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow into a movie, then I would say this was the right way to handle the situation. You're probably wondering to yourselves then how the execution messes it up because I mentioned that it's a good idea on paper. First things first, while we understand why Krem is a threat to this planet, and I'll give credit that the child bride plot they came up with for the movie actually matches some of the brigands' crimes in the comic, but we don't get to know the planet itself. Kara and Ruthie don't really interact with anyone besides the brigands, which we know are the bad guys. Lobo, who's there on a mission and has no attachment to the place. They do seek shelter with this one family. You know, the same family who sells them out to Krem, so who the fuck cares about them after that? And we also barely get to know this family, because this is the point where the movie drops the big Krypton flashback on us. That's not how you develop a world. See, the problem isn't that we cut down on the number of planets and subplots. The problem is that the one planet we do get, which does have an interesting story at its center, isn't well established and doesn't really develop the characters afterwards. In the comic, each planet and new discovery about it left some sort of an impact on Ruthie, who discovers the universe is a lot more complicated than just having good guys and bad guys in it. Each new location also brings Kara and Ruthie closer together, with the former becoming somewhat of a big sister to the latter. I don't think either Kara or Ruthie learned anything from this planet and what went on in it. Which brings me to the next point. In Woman of Tomorrow, Supergirl was sometimes too late to solve a planet's crisis. The damage was already done and there's nothing she and Ruthie could do now besides try and make sure it won't happen again. Here, just as Supergirl thinks she saved all the little girls and gave them back to their families, one is still out there and hiding from Krem. Ruthie uses the opportunity to try and kill him before Kara stops her and Krem ends up murdering the girl and her family. This isn't a problem Supergirl and Ruthie couldn't have stopped because they were too late. This is a problem Supergirl and Ruthie caused because Ruthie couldn't listen to Kara and Kara is being a hypocrite, although we're not there yet. You know what though? I want to give the movie credit for something here. In Woman of Tomorrow, Supergirl and Ruthie never really fought with each other. They have an argument or two, but it's never a big fight which ends with them parting ways or having to reconcile later. I'm not saying the story needed it. In fact, it's a cliche I'm getting quite sick of in recent years, but you know what? I don't mind the idea of the movie having this fight between them. They're two different people, and it makes sense a family being murdered, which is kind of their fault, would lead to this argument. Again, an idea I don't mind on paper, despite not caring for the trope. It just sucks that the relationship isn't well developed and they make up less than 10 minutes after. Here's the main issue here. Supergirl and Ruthie's friendship doesn't feel as strong as it did in the comic. It's not that it's different. I just feel like the movie missed the key aspects of this dynamic. And it sucks to say because the pieces were there, are still here to an extent. Millie Alcock and Eve Ridley have good chemistry. The basis for their friendship is obviously solid, and I like how a lot of the action scenes are shot from Ruthie's point of view, which shows Supergirl as this powerful fighter who's almost a force of nature in the way she fights. In fact, the action being shown from Ruthie's point of view is something the movie adapted well from the comic. Seeing the action from this young girl's point of view shows how she views the superhero and helps build their dynamic. But while they got that part right, they didn't really get the friendship itself, and it's not as natural as it was in the book, which is a big issue in an adaptation. And I guess this leads us to the ending, huh? Or rather, Supergirl's decision in the ending. Following the really cool final action sequence, Ruthie has Krem at sword point and is about to kill him until Supergirl stops her and convinces her to not do it. For all the gripes I have with the film's writing, "Your life will be your revenge" is a powerful line which wasn't in the comic, and it works really well here. This line also fits with Supergirl's general idea. She lost her entire home and had to adjust to a new planet while knowing her family and her friends are dead and will never return. Regardless of what did Krypton in this side of the multiverse, Kara continuing to live and becoming Supergirl, saving people and inspiring them, shows that she's strong enough to continue on living despite her trauma. The strength and hope she presents is different from Superman and also makes it one reason why I prefer her to him personally. Ruthie does listen to Supergirl and decides to not kill Krem, convinced by the superhero's words that revenge will only mess her up more. And then Supergirl kills Krem herself. You know what's weird? I don't really mind Supergirl killing the bad guy. Considering her thing is that she's filled with anger and trauma and such, I could see her crossing that line sometimes. It happens in a few comics too, although these are the exception to the rule. However, and that's a big however, so big that actually the last two times I said it, I wrote it in all caps in the script. I mind it happening in an adaptation of Woman of Tomorrow, which this movie is. The point of the original story is that revenge isn't the answer, and just like Kara herself says in the movie, Ruthie's life will be her revenge. She deliberately stops Ruthie from killing Krem twice in this movie. But when it comes to the moment of truth, she does it herself behind Ruthie's back. From a writing standpoint, it makes Kara look like a hypocrite. As an adaptation, I think they were trying to make a line from the comic serve as the excuse, where Supergirl realizes Ruthie will kill Krem no matter what, so she offers to do it since that way Ruthie's soul isn't tainted. I guess I get that idea, but it still goes against the point of the original story, which they must have known if Kara says it as blatantly as possible in the movie. Again and again and again. I don't care if it's different. I even admitted that generally I'm not objecting to Supergirl killing that much if it fits the story. In this story, however, in this adaptation, in this movie, it misses the mark. It breaks the story. And it screws up the message of the source material to the point you have to ask yourselves why they adapted it in the first place. besides the fact that it's a really popular story. And you know what the sad part is? I think I know who to point the finger at. This may be a bit controversial and we may tread some waters we shouldn't, but you know what? Let's do it anyway. Let's talk behind the scenes. About a year or two ago, I had a conversation with one of my friends about the Netflix Avatar show. I'm leading to something with this, hear me out. She was very excited about it because the actors said in interviews that they are big fans of the original animated series and they wanted to do it justice. I told her it's all well and good, but what exactly did she expect them to say? Fuck this kiddie animated shit, we're doing the grown up manly version with actual actors. This real tale actually solves the point that cast interviews, and crew interviews in general for that matter, aren't always a good enough indication to how a crew behind an adaptation views the source material. On a somewhat similar note, remember when Alan Richson told fans to be optimistic about 2014's Ninja Turtles movie, and then a few years later he opened up about how terrible it was for him to do these movies? Yeah, in terms of what the crew feels about the source material, don't always trust the press tour junket. Trust the retrospect after some time has gone by. What's interesting in the case of these two movies is that the press junket for Supergirl 26 paints a very odd picture as to what the crew's relationship with Women of Tomorrow even was. We have a lot more than the press junket stuff for Sonic Movie 3, which is kind of obvious considering the movie has been out for over a year and a half by this point. So I figured, you know what, why not look over those things in order to determine another factor of the comparison. Please note that I'm just looking at the core creative team for each movie. I'm obviously not counting any of the little people who worked on these movies because there's a ton of them and not anyone is going to speak up. And this isn't aimed at either Paramount or Warner Brothers as a whole. Huh, you know, speaking of retrospect, how funnier would this bit be if the buyout is actually going to happen and Paramount is going to own Warner Brothers? I guess we'll know in a few years. In the case of Sonic Movie 3, director Jeff Fowler and writers Pat Casey and Josh Miller have already proven themselves with the previous two movies. We are only going to talk about the third movie in depth now, since it is the core of the comparison, but there is something to point out about the previous two movies. The first Sonic movie wasn't based on any particular game. It was just a movie which had Sonic the Hedgehog as its main character, and it worked well for what it was, really. The second movie was a collage of Sonic the Hedgehog 2, Sonic 3 and Knuckles, and I guess Sonic Heroes to some degree. This movie was the first time they only had one game to serve as the basis for the story, even if there are references to other entries thrown in. In every interview I've seen with the guy, as well as the commentary on the Blu-ray, Jeff Fowler talks about one key thing: how important it was to get Shadow right. He knew people would want Sonic Adventure 2 to be the main inspiration for the movie after Shadow was teased in Sonic Adventure 2. And boy did he deliver on what he promised. It's actually pretty wholesome how many times he mentions the fans in the commentary for the movie, and how much he knows what they wish to see in each movie. He never sacrifices the story for these things, he finds ways to incorporate them into the plot. I didn't find much to say about the writers, sadly, but from what I've seen of them, they share Jeff Fowler's understanding of what was important to include in the movie. They understood the task, and they rose to the occasion. Another factor which helps us here is Keanu Reeves' portrayal of Shadow. Besides the fact that Keanu Reeves is just one of the greatest actors of our time, who also seems like a very cool dude, he was many people's first choice to voice the character. I myself said that the moment I walked out of Sonic Movie 2. Jeff Fowler even states in the commentary, again, that part of his speech to Keanu was telling him how much fans wanted him to voice Shadow, since everybody knew he had the right voice for it. It's kind of amazing how much the fans were a part of every decision behind the scenes. To give Keanu himself some credit, he could have easily phoned it in. Voice work, it's technically a family movie, he could have just shown up to the booth, do his thing, get paid, and then leave. He didn't do that though. Again, according to the director, Keanu studied previous portrayals of the character in order to come in prepared. He's even the one who pitched the idea of Sonic and Shadow commenting about how they look like each other. That's dedication to the source material from the last person I would expect. He even changes his voice a bit when he's doing Shadow. You can still tell it's him, he's not that much of a vocal chameleon or anything, but he's definitely lowering his pitch a bit when he's playing the part. Again, showing that he doesn't just want to do him, he wants to be in service of the character. And should I mention the interview where he admits that hearing fans cheer for Shadow in the second movie made him realize he needs to do them justice, and that he does feel some sort of pressure to satisfy them? PR talk? Maybe. Definitely a possibility. But his performance in the movie tells a very different story. Before we move on to Supergirl's portion, I need to make something clear. I may share some critiques I have with the crew behind the scenes. It's an analytical video at the end of the day, of course I'm gonna do that. But that being said, this isn't meant in malice to any of them, and this isn't meant to be a slander video. I'm sure they're all great people, some of them have proven themselves before and they'll do it again in the future, I am sure. Being critical of their work on one project doesn't mean I hate them as people, and it doesn't mean I hate any of their other work. And in case you want to use that video as slander against them, please get the hell out, I don't want you here. Okay, I'm going a bit unscripted here because as I was working on this video, an article by The Hollywood Reporter came out which describes the many reasons as to why Supergirl 26 ended up being a lesser movie. I did read the article and I was considering mentioning it, but the more I thought about it, it didn't really play into what I wanted to say here. This is just talking about the movie as an adaptation of Women of Tomorrow, and this article is more talking about the whole production of the movie as a movie. The Hollywood Reporter talks about behind-the-scenes issues which aren't really relevant to the conversation. So I'm not going to mention it beyond this part. We good on it? Okay, let's get into it. So, how many of you expect me to talk shit about James Gunn now? Well, sorry to disappoint you, I'm not gonna do that. At least not entirely, since there's something which I think is important to bring up. As the now head of DC Studios, he obviously has a lot of say on what projects get the green light and what gets made. How fitting it is then that he's the one who decided that Supergirl 26 would be an adaptation of Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. That's how the movie was announced back when James Gunn took over. And even more surprising, this was only like a year after Woman of Tomorrow's final issue came out. So, James Gunn clearly liked the story a lot and was excited and passionate about the idea of adapting it so quickly. Looking at all of this in hindsight, however, I'm not entirely sure anymore if Woman of Tomorrow was the best comic to serve as Supergirl's introduction to this universe. Hold that, didn't you say Woman of Tomorrow was a great jumping-in point for Supergirl? Yeah, I did, and I stand by it. Because there's a difference between a standalone comic, which can exist whenever in the character's timeline, and a movie set in the same continuity as a big universe that these guys are building up. A movie which continues from the previous one and sets up a future one. So from the get-go, maybe using that specific story wasn't the best idea right now. It could have worked as a sequel or a threequel or something later on, but not the introduction. On a side note, I think being Super would have been a perfect introduction for this version of Supergirl, but I'm not the one calling the shots. I get why James Gunn picked Woman of Tomorrow, it's a beloved modern classic. But did he actually stop and think maybe we should get a simpler origin story before jumping into Woman of Tomorrow? Come on, man, that's a Zack Snyder type of mistake. Sorry, not sorry about that joke. You know what though? Okay, we picked Woman of Tomorrow as the basis. This can still work well as the first film with this version of the character, in the right hands anyway. And to be fair, Craig Gillespie is a talented filmmaker who has experience directing films with female leads and has his own style, so he seems like the right choice. I just wish he'd actually look at the damn comic he's adapting. I get it. He wants to have some artistic control over his project, and to be fair, I don't think the movie's ugly or anything. But would it really hurt to have some more color in there, like in the damn comic? Would it really hurt the artistic vision that much if you peeked at the damn comic book? Just to make sure the script you're forcing actors to perform matches any of it? I respect the director wanting to maintain his creative vision, I really do. But this was pitched as an adaptation from day one, and the director didn't even look at the source material. What does this tell you exactly? And now, Ana Noguera, the film's writer. I just want to say that I know it's her first time writing a feature-length film, and I wish her nothing but the very best in her career. Having said that, I think it's fair and also needed to criticize what I think doesn't work. You probably know by this point that everyone talked about the fact she said Supergirl always killed Krem in every draft of the script, since the first pitch. Reason being that Ruthie kills him at the end of the comic when he is old, after serving his time in the Phantom Zone. There are some debates on it, but the last page of Woman of Tomorrow is a bit open for interpretation. I myself admitted to thinking Ruthie killed Krem as well when I first read it. I'm not going to blame Anna for misunderstanding the story. It happens, it's human. I'm mostly questioning why she didn't fact-check it with Tom King, who confirmed that this isn't what's going on at the end. It's not like Tom King would deny helping. If anything, he's done nothing but promote this movie on his Instagram and he seems legitimately excited about it. I'm sure he would have lended a hand and answered any question you may have had. You had the guy, why not talk to him? And that's the main point I wanted to bring up. We have a producer who jumped the gun on the source material, pun somewhat intended, a director who deliberately ignored it, and an inexperienced writer who may have gotten the basics down but missed the heart and message of it. Again, I don't know the guy, I could be talking out of my ass, but I do believe Tom King would have helped if you asked him. And considering everything I just described, isn't this basically the holy trinity of how to not adapt something? Like, ever? I just now realized that I talked for so long and I only slightly touched on something that's very important. The actual heart of it all. The reason you adapt something to begin with. The message you want to share with people. Better get right to it then, shall we? It's kind of amazing how the more I write this, the more similarities I find between these two stories, be it the originals or the movie adaptations. You wouldn't expect a story about a super fast sarcastic hedgehog and a story about an alcoholic refugee superhero to be similar, and yet somehow here we are. I did bring up the fact that both Sonic Adventure 2 and Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow have a similar theme of revenge, but their hearts are quite different. The heart of Sonic Adventure 2 is Shadow's relationship with Maria and how much her death impacts his choices. His main motivation throughout the whole game is avenging her, since he believes that's what he promised her. It's only when he realizes his mistake that he changes gears completely and teams up with Sonic in order to save the world. For a character that's essentially dead and non-existent in the present day, Maria is the driving force of this story. The heart of Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow is Kara and Ruthie's friendship, and how it develops throughout their journey. For what is essentially a chance encounter between an adult superhero who's gone through stuff and a sad kid dealing with grief, these two are both very different and very alike. Supergirl learned to live past her trauma despite missing Krypton, while Ruthie learns how to deal with her pain even though it's still fresh in her mind. By all accounts, this also applies to both Sonic Movie 3 and Supergirl 26 as well, with some changes of course. In the former's case, Shadow's anger at Maria's death is fueled by Gerald, who pushes him towards revenge. It's thanks to Sonic's actions that Shadow realizes his mistake, and Sonic himself also learns that there are no winners with revenge. As for the latter, Supergirl's arc in the movie revolves around how she can still be a hero and inspire hope despite her tragic past. And Ruthie realizes that being able to keep living despite her loss is her true victory over crime. The hearts are there, but with different execution. Quite literally in Supergirl 26's case. Okay, bad jokes aside, there's another side to all of this. While it's great that both adaptations got the heart of their source materials, meaning there's some sort of understanding of the original work, does this also mean they got the messages right? You may know where I'm going with this, but I need to explain myself, so let's go over it quickly. Both movies have the same general lesson you're supposed to take from them, which is revenge is bad. This isn't the first time a movie, a game, a comic, anything really, touched on the idea that getting revenge over something is a bad thing, especially if you get it by murdering someone. It's a lesson you can find literally anywhere, and it's pretty basic in the current day and age. This topic is also connected to the idea of making a choice and how those choices affect you and who you are. You can choose to get even with the guy who hurt you. You could even kill him if you want. And it might satisfy you at the moment, but would it make you feel better in the long run? Sonic Movie 3 does something interesting with these lessons, as the original game didn't really try to teach you any morals. Again, Shadow's choice from evil to good doesn't come from a deep realization about himself, he just realizes he fucked up and misremembered his promise to his friend. If Amy hadn't jogged his memory, he would still be content with letting the Earth be destroyed. In the grand picture, there's no lesson being taught about why he shouldn't go along with it or if he should make the choice for himself. He just realizes his memory made an oopsie. The movie, on the other hand, makes it as if revenge is Shadow's choice, affected by Gerald, of course, and the moment in which he realizes he is wrong is the same moment Sonic realizes the exact same thing about himself. He could have killed Shadow, but that's not who he is. At that very moment, two former enemies make new choices. Sonic chooses to forgive the guy who hurt his father figure, and Shadow chooses to fix the mistake he made. Both of those choices result in the Earth being saved. I just realized that this applies to Eggman too, who makes the choice to rebel against his grandfather the second he realizes he's gone mad beyond repair. The message of the movie isn't necessarily that revenge is bad or that it will fuck you up, it's about how every choice you make at any moment can dictate who you are inside. And I say again that all of this actually makes the adaptation better than the source material, since that stuff wasn't really in there. The movie took something that was pretty basic and turned it into something that says something, means something. Supergirl 26 essentially touches on the same ideas, as that's what Kara tries to teach Ruthie. Don't give in to revenge because it will fuck you up, and your choice to continue on living will be your true victory in the end. Nothing wrong with that message, again, that's basically what the comic teaches. It all comes down to choices at the end of the day. So considering our choices define us, Supergirl's choice makes her a lying hypocrite who'd probably never beat her trauma in Endgirl. Telling Ruthie not to get revenge by murdering Krem seconds before she literally gets revenge by murdering the exact same guy she told the girl not to kill? Where's the victory here exactly? How does this relate to her accepting her status as a hero and a bringer of hope? Am I missing something? This ties us to another lesson this movie is trying to impel. You don't have to be nice in order to be good. A bit of a wise quote told to Kara by her mother. On its own, I really like that message because it fits Supergirl's character. Yeah, she's a good person who is helping people and fights crime and all of that, but she's not a goody two-shoe Girl Scout like her cousin. She's rude, cynical, and an overall mess, but it doesn't dictate who she is. Her actions do. Despite losing her home, her family, her friends, everything she's ever known, and having to start anew in a whole different planet which sees her as an outsider, Supergirl still fights crime and does good because that's who she is. Yeah, she's a bit rougher than her cousin, but it doesn't mean she's not doing good, and I like how the movie essentially says that yeah, it's okay to not be okay 100% of the time, as long as you're good at your core. It's not something which was taken from Women of Tomorrow, it's a movie edition, but I accept it as a lesson to teach revolving around this character and her arc in the movie. Now, when I look at Supergirl's choice to kill Krem with that idea in mind, it actually makes the scene worse. One of the explanations I've seen of that choice by the team behind the movie is that it was a way to differentiate Supergirl from Superman. Well, my argument to that claim is that she's already different from him. The whole damn movie is about that, that's the whole point. Superman is nice, Supergirl is jaded. He loves Earth and lives there and will do anything to protect it. She runs away from it because she doesn't see it as home like he is. Her home was destroyed. Forget the movie for a second, that's the core contrast between these two characters in a lot of adaptations. With Kara killing Krem, we basically established that she's not nice but also not really all that good. She denied this little kid her revenge because she wanted to do it herself. And that's good because the guy really deserves it? I think. You see what I mean? It's confused, it's not focused, it contradicts itself. Forget misrepresenting the comics message for a second. I'm trying to figure out what the damn message of the movie even is now, and why did they have to butch the character like this? Character. Here's the magic word, which actually segues us pretty well into the next topic. Considering I admitted that Sonic and Supergirl are two characters I love dearly, I only think it's fair to talk about how the movies portray them in these adaptations. Obviously, they are the titular characters in both the source materials and the movies. But what if I told you there's more to it than just them being the main characters? Or maybe, what if I told you that they are not really the main characters in the respective source material at all? Surprised? Well, did you play or read the source materials? Okay, sarcasm aside, despite being the titular character of Sonic Adventure 2, Sonic himself isn't the main character, nor is the story actually about him. Shadow's more the main character than he is. Think about it, Shadow is the one who moves the plot along, he's the one with the motivation, and he's the one who goes through the triumphant moment of truth. Sonic is basically dragged into the whole thing because of his resemblance to Shadow and needing to stop Eggman. He doesn't know about the Ark, Gerald, Maria, none of that. He only gets involved because he needs to beat the bad guys. He even says so to his friends. He doesn't know what the whole Ark thing is about, but he will find and destroy that cannon. That's all he sets out to do, and that's really all he does. He doesn't go through an arc, he doesn't learn anything, he's just there to be the hero. This isn't a criticism of Sonic Adventure 2 for the record. This is just the kind of character Sonic is. He doesn't really grow or learn or change because the stories he stars in aren't really about him. I'm using plural because this also applies to a lot of the other games as well. He may be the face of the franchise, but he's not the main character in any particular story. He's the supporting character who pushes the main character of each story forward, and that's been a theme for most of the games. Sonic Adventure 2 wasn't even the first time it happened, although I'd argue it was the first time he got dragged into a story as dark and deep as Shadows. Supergirl is basically the same in Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. Yeah, despite having her name in the title, the story isn't really about her. The story focuses on Ruthie's journey with her and how she views the hero throughout. Just like the Hedgehog I'm comparing her to, she's also just kinda dragged into this thing by happenstance. Unlike him though, the Maid of Might does have her development in the story. While traversing the galaxy with Ruthie, she also learns how to make the symbol her own and how she can offer compassion and guidance despite her past and regardless of her connection to Superman. It's just more of a secondary arc compared to Ruthie's, which is the focus. What's interesting is that Supergirl's development here would have been the main arc in any other story featuring her. This character is essentially the walking definition of a survivor's guilt because, unlike her cousin, she remembers Krypton and actually grew up on it. She had a family, friends, a life. All of that is gone now. Combine that with the fact she's a teenager in most of her incarnations, and you get a tragic character who has a lot of room to grow and plenty to learn while having to deal with the expectations which come from wearing the symbol. This is where Woman of Tomorrow is different, as it presents us with a Kara who is now an adult and has gone through plenty of growth and learning over the years. Thus, it makes sense that the story isn't much about her and puts more focus on the younger Ruthie, who has a lot more to learn and gain from this adventure. They both go through their separate arcs, but one has already kinda gone through it off screen, and we can tell it because she's older. The other one is still a kid who has a lot to learn. So how do Sonic the Hedgehog and Supergirl translate into films which are literally named after them? Well, in Sonic's case, his movie counterpart is slightly different from his game counterpart. The basics are there, he's fast, sarcastic, adventurous and playful, but he's also lacking some characteristics you may expect out of the original Sonic, in order for the movies to teach him something. In the first movie he learned how to trust his powers, and in the second movie he learned about responsibility, bringing him closer to the original character from the games. In Sonic Movie 3, his main arc revolves around him being a leader and learning how to make the right choice. As I mentioned earlier, this wasn't in Adventure 2. This was a change made for the movie, since you would expect the main character to learn something. And yeah, unlike the game, Sonic is the main character of the story alongside Shadow. As such, the writers thought of a lesson which would be sensible for this version of Sonic to learn in this scenario. He has his confidence and he has his team. It only makes sense that he'd learn how to trust that team and make the right decision when the time calls for it. What Sonic learns fits into the plot structure of the movie and fits with the ideas the source material presented. It also connects well with Shadow's character arc, providing a satisfying conclusion to both of them. Supergirl is different in terms of how her character is usually presented in the comics. In her debut, she was basically the same as Superman, or even Sonic for that matter. She wouldn't really change or develop because the stories were usually not about her. They were about the people she saves and how she saves them, which, to be fair, was the style for superhero comics at the time. It's only in later years where the writers started playing with the idea that Supergirl remembers Krypton, which results in her being angrier and less accepting of the fact that Earth is now her home than Superman. This gives the character more layers and more things to explore with her, at least in my eyes. When Woman of Tomorrow came out, the idea of Supergirl being much rougher and being more grey than a clear black and white was more common. The comic used it to its advantage by giving us a version of Kara who's angry, cynical and depressed, but also aged up to be 21 instead of a teenager. This wasn't done just so that she'd be able to drink her sorrows away though. The fact that she's older allows her to be a mentor to Ruthie, who's going through a similar trauma, only she's losing herself to it. Supergirl may go through her own arc in the movie, but because it's similar to what she's trying to teach Ruthie, nothing detracts from anything. She even says in the comic that she knows Ruthie wouldn't give up the idea of killing Krem because deep down she still misses Krypton. She understands what the girl is going through because she's gone through the exact same thing. The two arcs connect because they are similar to one another. In Supergirl 26, it feels like there are two journeys which are oftentimes clashing with each other. Kara's arc in the movie revolves around her mixed emotions about her identity as a superhero. The reason she doesn't wear the suit until the very end is because she doesn't see it as something worthwhile. She doesn't believe that she is inspiring or hopeful because she is stuck too deep in her trauma and depression and doesn't see a way out. Then we have Ruthie's arc, which is about learning how revenge isn't the way. You know, the message that is taught to her by the same girl who questions her own effect on people and then backpedals on said message. This is literally a mess the more I think about it. As a movie by itself, as an adaptation of Woman of Tomorrow, it's just, what were you trying to achieve here? Okay, here's the thing. In Woman of Tomorrow, Supergirl is an established superhero. Even if it's your first Supergirl comic, like it was mine, you're given plenty of insight into the fact she's been doing this for a while, and her drinking was a one-time thing. You know that when she's teaching Ruthie something, she's speaking from experience because she's been through this shit before. In the movie, they somewhat changed that so that she's more so a party animal all the time and a superhero. Maybe. The only thing implying her heroics is that newspaper clip saying she saved a cat, and you need a magnifying glass in order to even see it. This may not sound like a huge change, and to be fair, in the right hands it could have worked, but it actually makes the story have an identity crisis. This is what made me realize Woman of Tomorrow may not have been the right choice as the first Supergirl story to adapt in this universe. Yes, the origin story does happen in the comic, I'm very much aware, but Supergirl's role in the story isn't the same. In the movie, it's clear Kara is the main character. In the book, Kara wasn't the main character, and her arc complemented Ruthie's. In the movie, it's clear that Kara is the main character and her arc is taking center stage. She doesn't care about her suit and even debates staying on planets with red suns so that she wouldn't need to be a hero because she doesn't have her powers. But because we're adapting the very specific book, this isn't the only character journey in the movie. Supergirl's arc about self-discovery is fighting for center stage with Ruthie's arc about learning how to get past her trauma because the movie doesn't seem to know if it wants to be an origin story which sets Kara up as her own hero or one where she's mentoring a young girl with a similar past. You start to see what I mean? In Supergirl 26, these two things are in constant conflict with each other throughout the whole thing, and I think this is where the problems start. And the sad part is that they didn't have to make up an arc for Kara to go through like they had to with Sonic. She had a journey in the source material, which they expanded on, I think? And it was the wrong decision because, like I said, now there's a conflict between the two stories, and it makes the movie inconsistent and clunky. Supergirl needs to learn how she could be aspiring to people despite her shortcomings, which she kinda does by mentoring this one kid, and then she murders an asshole after trying to convince the kid to not do it. Is it satisfying? Is it empowering? If Kara got revenge despite saying revenge is bad, then how does this make her a better superhero? You know, I think I stopped making sense a long time ago and I'm letting the disappointment talk now. So, you know what? I've gone over everything. Let's wrap this up. By this point in the video, you should know that Sonic Movie 3 is the better adaptation between the two movies. Despite Supergirl 26 being slightly more faithful to Woman of Tomorrow in terms of the general plot structure and set pieces, it completely misrepresented the message of the original story, while Sonic Movie 3 took a message which wasn't even in the original game and made it work in an amazing way. Supergirl 26 did know what the heart of the source material was, but the changes made for the movie hurt it instead of making it stronger. Before we wrap up, I just want to make it clear that I don't think Sonic Movie 3 is a perfect movie by any means. If I'm gonna be fair about it, I could have used more screen time for Shadow, and I think the very ending of the movie is a tiny bit rushed. They are not huge problems and they don't take away from anything I said, but I wanted to bring out that yeah, this is not a perfect movie. And from the other side of the theater, I don't think Supergirl 26 is a cinematic disaster by any means. Most of the action sequences are fantastic, and I have nothing but praise to give Millie Alcock's take on Kara, which is very fun and fitting with the version of the character she is playing. In fact, that applies to the other actors. All of them did great with what they had to work with. Yeah, the script is problematic, but I can enjoy the stuff which was good in it. As I probably said plenty of times before, I love both of these characters, and I want the best possible treatment for both of them. This comparison video wasn't made because I want Sonic to succeed and Supergirl to fail. No, don't be ridiculous, this is not the point in the slightest. These are characters I enjoy dearly, and I better get both of them interacting with each other in the current Sonic and DC crossover event. Don't let me down, Ian! Back on point though, while I enjoyed Supergirl 26 overall, there was plenty about it which didn't click with me as a fan of the character and the particular story. By comparing it to Sonic Movie 3, which is based on a story that has some similarities as I pointed out, I thought I could bring those points to light in a better way. To remove any doubts, these were two movies I was beyond excited for. Hell, some of my friends would even tell you that being excited for them was my personality for a bit. and when one of them exceeded my expectations, the other one fell short of them. When something like this happens, I think it's interesting to discuss what made one a success and the other a movie that exists. Let's go with that. Actually, thinking about it now, isn't it ironic that we'll see both characters on the big screen again next year? Sonic has the fourth movie, and Supergirl is confirmed to have a big role in Man of Tomorrow. So maybe the comparisons will continue on beyond this video. I don't know, I just hope both movies are good. That's really all I could hope for. I want both of these characters to do well. Until then, I think that was enough of my ramblings for today. I remind everyone that there's no intention to insult any names mentioned here or send people to attack them. They're all talented individuals who are just doing their job. And if you decide to do that anyway, it seems like you yourself didn't get the message that these two movies try teaching you. Or at least the one movie and comic book taught you, since the game doesn't really teach anything and the other movie is confused about the message.